Welcome to Resiliency The Podcast, the place for stories, strategies, and inspiration on how you can embrace change, overcome challenges, and redefine resilience in today's ever-evolving world. If resilience is a topic of interest for you, we hope you will subscribe to our YouTube channel or give us a like wherever you may be listening today. I am Jenn Quader. I'm your host. I'm a strategic communicator and also the head of a firm called the Smart Agency. Please welcome our Doctor of Resiliency, Dr. Kelly Culver. Today, we are also joined by an additional co-host. Our executive producer, Jenn Quader, heard that there was a chef on today's show, and he really only thinks with his stomach, so he had to join the fun. So, Jenn, welcome to the game. We are honored today to introduce a really special guest. This is someone who I've known for many, many years, and who has an amazing story to tell of resilience, you guys. So today's guest has been called the most interesting man in Orange County, California. I tend to agree. He is a chef, an incredible chef, you guys, absolutely amazing. He's an author of a book that is wonderful called Death, Discovery, and Carne Asada. He's an entrepreneur. He's a philanthropist. He's an artist, a beautiful artist. And he's an aspiring cooking show host. The list really goes on and on, you guys. This is a creative individual with amazing, amazing energy. And more than all of these things, in 2019, he completed something absolutely amazing. He walked across the entire United States, from North Carolina to California, to raise money for pediatric cancer research. His walk took him across 14 states, over 3,235 miles. And for you step counters out there, that's 7.68 million steps. This is absolutely incredible. Guys, I can't wait for you to hear him, meet him, learn more about his story. Please welcome the great Thomas Curran.
Wow.
Cheer, cheer, cheer.
Never had an introduction like that before. I am interested to know if it was my mom who told you that I was the most interesting person in Orange County. I've never heard that before.
Look, we got a shout out.
Put that in my next book.
It's got that. We'll put that in the press for your next book, Thomas. That's what we'll do. Actually, that statement was said by a great, wonderful journalist and influencer here in Orange County, Greer Wilder of Greer's OC. She's well known in lifestyle, and she calls you the most interesting man in Orange County. And so does Resiliency the Podcast.
I love that.
So
I know. Here we are together. I'm with two very old friends of mine, one new friend of mine, and this face-eating microphone that I feel is about to cut my cheek.
It's a nice mic, too.
good one.
Do I sound interesting?
Well, Tom, welcome to the podcast. We're really, really thrilled to have you on, and you know it's going to be cool for me because I'm just getting to know you. So this will be a fun session. I've got a question for you, though. We tend to start our podcast with the same question that we ask everybody, and it's a really big one. What does resiliency mean to you?
Well, I was queued up on that a little bit, so I've had a lot of time to thought. Through my life, it has meant different things. It has, to me, it's always been about being motivated, believing in success, planning, but with very loose guardrails and room for flexibility, all with the end goal of getting to the end, making it, and hopefully with enough sanity to enjoy a glass of wine at the end. Sometimes resiliency to me has been in my chef world, where if you're not resilient, you're out. And then when I was alone for 8 months, walking across the country, all the way to this morning when I showed up and almost had to set this little studio up in a bathroom because someone's out there making a lot of noise. So just, resiliency presents itself every day, and it's whether you decide to tackle it or not. And in my profession, you have no choice but to be resilient. And then, of course, in my walk, which we'll talk about more, survival depended on it. And so it's kind of the story of my life. My life has never been still. I've never had a still life. And my movement has always been wrapped in either sweat and stress of a kitchen or pain and patience from walking 20 miles a day for 8 months. So there's the
Thomas, do you think that because you like that lifestyle, you are more adherent to being resilient?
Yeah, well, does one trigger one or does one trigger the other? Yeah, I do think that
Correct.
my lifestyle requires that. But I think I've always been that
Right.
way. Yeah. I think I've been that way since I was a kid. I've always been told that I'm very adaptable to any situation. So perhaps that is resilience built in.
Oh, I want to dig on that though, because I think, resilience is something, and you spoke to it really nicely in your definition, which is something you choose. It's that belief in success. It's something you face every day. And so I think while there are always characteristics that are maybe inborn in us, there could be personality traits and things like that. I want to make sure we're looking at kind of the concept of resilience because no one made you walk across the country, and no one makes you work in a hot kitchen. I mean, I can be honest, when I watch those Iron Chefs and things like that, I'm like, you couldn't pay me enough money to do that. So talk to me for a minute, because you said, being a chef, it requires resilience. Like there's no question for not having it. Talk to us just for a moment about the resilience of being a chef, and what does that mean within your busy moving life?
That's actually a really good point. You're right. It is a choice. I hadn't thought about it before. I did choose to become a chef. I did choose to walk. Resilience in a kitchen is about individual resilience, but also as a leader in a kitchen. If you're the chef or the owner, you're required to build team resilience, because you don't have extra bodies floating around the kitchen to fill in if somebody breaks down. Everyone has to win together, and at the end of the night you win. If one person fails, then there's a pretty good chance that the whole team's going to fail that night. So building team resilience is important, because a service never happens without something bad happening. A dish coming back, or an unhappy guest, or dropping that piece of meat on the floor when the entire table's tickets are already up in the window. And now what do? You've got one person without food. I mean, these things happen every single shift in every single restaurant. And if you are not resilient, if you don't figure out how to quickly bounce back from that, boy, things go sideways real quick, because those tickets keep coming out of the printer, and the guests don't care what your problem is. So you better figure it out. Decide that maybe that's not the right career for you. It's not for everyone. Being in the weeds is what we say, and I'm sure you've heard that on TV and stuff, but it's getting in the weeds, which happens every day. It's more how you get out of the weeds, and either individually or collectively as a team. It's critical.
So you were doing this for 30 years. You stopped.
Yes.
And you decided to walk across the country. What inspired this?
It came pretty quickly, actually. I owned a restaurant in Orange County. I had a business partner, and it was a tough gig. I mean, we both loved the restaurant very much, but it was tough to make money there, and it took a big strain on our relationship. And we got to a point where we were needing to make some decisions professionally. He wanted to go one way, I wanted to go another. It just so happens that previous to that, 6 months prior, I'd read this book written by a man named Tyler Colson called By Men or By the Earth. And he had walked across America. He was an attorney in Chicago, just disillusioned with life. He got a dog and walked across America. And he's also an amazing author. And he wrote this book that basically, the title of his book was, If I Have to Die by Men or by the Earth, I Want the Earth to Do It. And that was where he was in life. And I'm like, oh, well, that is interesting. That sounds like something I'd like to do someday. And 6 months later, my business partner and I had a meeting and decided it's time to break up as a couple, as a business couple. And I said, okay, you get it. I'm going to go on a walk. And so I did. I trained for a few months. I got a dog because Tyler did, and my friends encouraged me to. And I learned how to have a dog because I didn't know how to do that. And I learned how to camp and strike camp, and I had to learn all of that. I'm not a camper, or I am now, but I wasn't then. I'd spent a life in kitchens, not a life on the road. I certainly didn't, I wasn't a runner, I wasn't an athlete. So I just decided to go for it and flew to the East Coast and hung out with my son and did it. That's how I made that decision.
I want to dig in for just a minute because all of us are going to have a million questions about your walk. Who does not want to hear about your 7.68 million steps and what you encountered? And we will get into that. But I want to linger for just a moment on this big thing that you just told us, which is like, look, and let's see if I say it right, Thomas. Like I'm a chef. I have a successful career as a chef. You're owning this amazing restaurant, which I happened to go to and enjoyed very much. And it wasn't just the service; it was the environment. Like you get the real estate and you create everything and you create this experience and you're working in this day in day out with your partner in this resilient business. And then you make a decision. Hey, I'm gonna take this break. And so what I want to do is I want to open this to a little bit of a talk about resilience, because from some perspectives, people would say, well, you quit. You know what I mean? Like your business, your partnership changed, you left this restaurant. And I really, before I have you even speak to that, Thomas, I'd like Dr. Kelly Culver to speak to this, because this is someone who's studied resilience from a strategic standpoint and has worked within governments and communities and with business owners. So Dr. Kelly, what do you see in Thomas's story by way of resilience? And let's talk about kind of this let's call it the counterculture of a way to have resilience. What is it? No action is action. Or tell me more about what you think in this decision that Thomas made.
Well, it's interesting me listening to how Thomas describes resilience, because here on the podcast, we talk quite about resilience is three things at the same time. It's persistence, it's adaptation, and it's transformation. And Thomas has described those three things in his definition of resilience. So Thomas, I think that's really cool. And the other thing that you said is that you're a person who keeps moving. And action is very important, and being able to confidently take decisions so that you can keep moving ahead and acting. But what I see in the story that you've told us so far and getting to know you a little bit better is that you decided that you were going to be comfortable in the silence. And the silence of stopping for a few minutes. Or silence of stopping for 8 months, however long it took you to walk across America and meet new people and do those kinds of things. But you said to yourself, I need to reframe. And when we are learning to use resilience in a more strategic way, we have to learn how to trust ourselves and listen to the inner voice. If we tune out the inner voice, then we're not building resilience in ourselves as a capacity or a capability. And you took that decision, you just like that, snap, and said, okay, this is what I need to do in order to reframe how I see my vision of the future, how I navigate towards the horizon. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, both of two things that you both said. Jen, I had never really thought like, oh yeah, that's kind of the opposite of resilience if I quit. I mean, there was more to the breakup than that. But what you just said, Dr. Kelly, is that, and I have spoken to this more, is that prior to my walk, I had a lot of fear of being alone. I never didn't have a girlfriend, for example. I always had to have a girlfriend in my life. I had a bar and a restaurant, and I spent most of my time in the bar part where all my friends were every night. And I lived on that. I mean, it's just the life of a chef. And I forced myself not only into being alone, and that's different than loneliness, but also into a lifestyle, of kind of homelessness, to be honest. I was walking with a cart full of stuff for 8 months and subjected myself to a lifestyle that I was actually fearful of. Not homelessness, but loneliness. And that actually excited me. Some friends think that maybe I had a little midlife crisis, and that's possible. I turned 50 that year. My son had graduated college that year, and I'm always a what's next kind of person. So maybe that triggered a little bit as well, unknowingly. But it is interesting to think of it as the way you just said it, Dr. Kelly, is a shift, a transformation from one extreme to another. And they are pretty extreme for most people. The life of a chef.
Speaking of the extreme, I know you have some fantastic stories of doing this walk. One of which includes having a gun pulled on you and then running from a tornado right after the gun was pulled on you.
On the same day.
Can you tell us the story?
Yeah, I can. So I have a friend named Lindsay, and she, a couple of years prior to my walk, she walked across America and then rode a bike back. She used an electric bike and went back. And we met on a forum, a private forum on Facebook. And she's just this crazy bar owner in Boston. And she took a very similar route that I did. So she became a lot of help for me. When I got into bad situations, she would call some people she knew in that area, and maybe they'd come help me. Well, she decided to come walk in Oklahoma for a couple of days with me. And one day we were on this lonely little road, and I was on the inside, which is kind of an important thing in this story. And she was more closer to the road. And in the distance, we saw this very large truck coming towards us. And you could tell when you're a walker, you pick up what we call the gap. And the gap is from the edge of the road to the wheel of the car coming. And you could see it if that gap gets smaller or bigger right away, as soon as you see the car. And if the gap starts getting smaller, you need to make some decisions to not get hit. Most of the time, they get bigger. People see you, they move out of the way. But this did not. And this truck was closing the gap slowly, slowly, slowly. And it was not slowing down. So Lindsay starts doing this, slow down, slow down. And the truck flew by us and just missed us. Well, me, I'm going to let that go. Lindsay, not so much. She turns around and double flips the bird to this guy in the middle of Oklahoma. Truck hits his brakes, throws it in reverse, and comes back towards us. And this man, who I'm guessing is maybe in his 70s, so Lindsay pulls her phone out and she's recording the whole video, right? And he gets out and he's looked like he just left church. And the guy pulls a gun from his hip and he points it at her and he says, "Girl, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." And my hands are up. I'm like the pacifist, right? I'm like, no, we're good. And she says, "Is this a family show? Can I say what she really said?"
You can
Do
say
what
what
you need
she
to do,
said.
buddy. Do what you need to do.
Yeah, it's okay.
"What do you do? Fucking shoot me?" And he goes, "I might." I'm like, "No." And I'm screaming and we're having this back and forth, like, "Please don't do this." And he put his gun away, got in his truck, and he drove off. And Lindsay looked at me and she goes, "Man, I'm so sorry." She goes, "Where I come from, I flip you off, you flip me off, we drink a beer." He goes, "That's why," she said, "that's why they call us massholes." And so we kept walking for the day. And that same day, we got to the town where she had some friends, and a tornado went straight through that town. And we were in their bunker and that night. So it was a wild day. That was a wild day.
Oh my
That was a good
gosh.
story. That was a fun day. The funny thing is that I was writing my book while I was doing this. And I said, "Lindsay, you know, this is going to be in the book, of course." And because she had told me, "Please don't tell my mom I just did that." And I said, "Well, I have to put it in the book." And my book is a murder mystery based on my walk. And I said, "You get to choose. Do you want to live or die in the book?" And I'm not going to tell you what she said. You'll just have to read the book.
Good teaser.
You'll
For
have to
our
read the
listeners, we'll
book.
put a link where you can buy the book and find out. Did Lindsay live or die? What did she pick? Please look in the show notes for that.
And
And let's talk about the book a little
Her mother
bit.
did read the book, and her mother now knows what she did.
I would hope so, since you're telling this on a podcast right now. So talk about your book. This is not a book necessarily about your walk. It's inspired by.
Well, it is the walk, actually.
Tell us about it.
I mean, it is. My goal was to write a memoir about my walk. But I don't really love memoirs that much, and I probably wouldn't write a very good one. So I decided to write a murder mystery based on my walk. So actually, everything in my book really happened, except the dead people. And so it is the story of my walk start to finish, but I had to create a murder mystery prior to leaving on my walk. The basic story is about a 50-year-old single chef who's got a restaurant and life is great. And one of his line cooks kills another line cook in the restaurant. Brutal murder. And she gets away.
So a Hallmark movie.
Yes. And because of that, I lose the character, which has my name as well, loses everything, the restaurant, everything, and decides to walk across America to figure out his life and hunt that bitch down. And in turn, he himself becomes a murderer. Oh. So I didn't tell you anything that you don't know from the back cover, but that is the story. But everything in the middle happened. Like, it's my walk. And the people
very
that died
rosy.
in the walk, I'm sorry?
It's very rosy. I love this picture you're painting for me.
But there's a little bit of revenge writing in it. Like, the people that do succumb to unnatural causes in the book are people that I met on my walk that, had I been a violent person, may have had an issue with in real life, but I'm not. So, I didn't meet all the nicest people in the world on my walk.
Thomas,
and
sorry.
A little bit of revenge writing in there.
So, Thomas, you killed me off in the book, didn't you?
Well, Asif, you'll have to read that part again.
Thomas, I want to ask because... Oh, go ahead.
I will say that my friend Sean, who was an integral part of my walk because he filmed the short film that we put out about it, I didn't really ask him if he wanted to be in the book. I just decided to put him in there. And I made him one of the worst characters in the book. And he was not happy about that.
Oh.
But he loves it now.
Well, I think it's part of why we asked you to be on Resiliency the podcast, Thomas, because your story is so interesting beyond just what you've done, beyond the success as a chef, beyond the walking across the country and these cool stories, but like your ability to kind of take on anything, meet all these people and then write stories about them. It's, it speaks to kind of your artistry. It speaks to who you are as we're meeting you. So I really want to ask you, as you look back at that and thinking about what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, which is you were already predetermined to be a fast mover and to go through these things. But through that walk, what did you learn about yourself?
Oh, that's one of my favorite questions, because I learned that I actually really like being alone, and I never had before. And now I kind of seek it out and find that time. When I got home, I bought a Sprinter van, and it took me a couple of years to build it out into a living environment. And my plan was to live in the van and just kind of do that van life thing that everyone's doing these days. I ended up meeting the love of my life while I was getting the van, and we're married, and I'm a stepfather now, so we can talk about resilience there as well.
Plenty of stories.
So I'm not living in the van. So I'm not living in the van naturally, but we go out in a lot, and I spend a lot of alone time with Bob. The name of my van is Bob, and yeah. So I actually.
What happened to the dog? What happened to the dog?
Wink. What? Tell us about Wink.
The dog.
Oh, Wink is wonderful. Wink made it 1,400 miles, and then I ate him.
Oh, gosh!
And
Thomas!
it was either him or me. We were both hungry. Just kidding. He made it to Oklahoma City, and
He made it to
started
Springford,
getting too
Ohio.
Yeah, all right. How appropriate for right now, right?
Sorry. I couldn't help
that was good.
myself.
That was
You
actually
guys
really
are just,
good.
it's weird.
It is. And I love that word right now. It got too hot for him, so he had to come home. And so he made it 1,400 miles, and now he's fat and happy. He's like, I don't walk anymore.
Good
but
boy.
he loved it. He was fantastic.
Well, I was going to ask
Yeah,
you about that,
shoot,
Thomas,
Wink.
because it struck me in the beginning when you said I was never still. That just struck me, as like because I find stillness to be such an important part of resilience. And then when you were talking about how you took on this journey because frankly you kind of realized you had a fear of loneliness and you were like, I'm going to face that fear head on, which is a really cool way to be resilient. But I remember watching your social media posts when you were walking across and when you announced that Wink had to go home. And I remember feeling this, oh, Thomas, sorry, he's going to be alone, like he's going to like, so tell me, did you figure it out when Wink left? Like, when did you find out, like, hey, I like this. I'm good at being alone.
Yeah, that was a tough time because it was somewhat sudden that the decision for him to leave, and it changed everything about the walk. First of all, he was my protector. He could hear things in the tent at night that I couldn't hear. I felt safer with him, of course, and he's a big dog with a great growl, so people didn't mess with me. But on the other side, I couldn't just walk into a bar and have a beer on the side of the road if I had a dog. So things shifted. I had to be a little more self-reliant in my safety, but I got to do things that I wasn't able to do with him. But it was pretty quick. I mean, I was in Oklahoma when he went home, and I went from Oklahoma City all the way, through some pretty desolate land without him. And it was pretty lonely, He was my cuddle bug in the tent every night. So but that was good. I mean, he needed to go home. And you know what? It changed how I felt about the walk as well. And so I got to experience both sides of that, which was important.
I want to ask you one more thing while you're in that moment, just thinking about, Wink has gone home. Here you are in Oklahoma. I don't know if this is before or after the gun has been pulled and your friend has told the guy to fuck off. But I'm interested in knowing, like, what you mentioned that for you, I heard in the beginning that for you, it's like you said, planning with light guardrails and then always focused on the end, end result, the end result. What was the end result? What was the carrot for you when you're there in Oklahoma and it's hot and it's sticky and you're probably getting eaten by mosquitoes? What kept you going to the end?
Well, after about a week and a half, I never really had, except for one day, a moment where I thought I would quit. And I think it was to be a part of something that is so small that, people don't do it. I have a tattoo on my arm. It's 114. See it right there, maybe. And according to the ledger of people who have done it that they've tracked since the early 1900s, I'm the 114th person that's done it. Now there's probably more, but 5 or 6 people a year walk coast to coast. So I think that there was that wanting to be a part of that somewhat exclusive club, but also I think internally I knew that I would figure out my whole life by the time I hit the Pacific Ocean. Naturally, that did not happen.
I was just going to say, really? Really?
I hoped that
I
was
don't
going to
think
happen.
so.
I thought that was going to happen. Why
No.
wouldn't it? If I can read a billboard 15 times walking towards it at 3 miles an hour, I should be able to figure out my whole life in 8 months alone. That didn't happen. But I think that kept me going. And also, I just couldn't imagine even getting halfway and not touching that water. Like, that would have been horrible for me to get even 2 weeks in. I mean, most people quit within the first week. And so, yeah, I just can't imagine not hitting that ending. You know what's interesting, though? You talk about the loose guardrails. That's the difference between the restaurant resiliency and the walking. In the restaurant, there is no loose guardrails. There are tight guardrails when you're a chef, very tight. But on the road, they have to be loose. I mean, my route changed every day, and life changed daily. So the guardrails loosened up after the restaurant world. They just had to happen.
And now I want to know where they landed. No, it's beautiful. That's exactly I mean, because that's really the story you're telling. You know, you've always lived a resilient life, but you lived one that was very, very stringent and busy and sweaty and difficult, and you left it for another one that was sweaty and difficult, but in a much more free and less stringent way for that walk. And now I want to
Yeah.
ask, where are those guardrails now? You've come back, you've met the love of your life, you're married, you're the owner of Hood Kitchen, and or co-owner of Hood Kitchen in Irvine, California. um, what Talk to us about that transition from that walk into the Pacific Ocean, which I got to see online. And if you follow Thomas Curran, look it up. It's a really cool video where he walks into the ocean at the end of his walk. But tell us about that journey from the walking into the Pacific Ocean into who you are now, and kind of how was it returning to normal life, and what did that look like? What did you redefine for yourself in this new life after the walk?
Yeah, to really answer that the best way, I'm going to go back to Lindsay, because we sat on a bridge and talked about this. She had done it, so she knew. And we were sitting on a bridge in Oklahoma, and she asked me, she goes, "So you want to do it again?" I said, "Lindsay, I'm only halfway through. I don't even know how I'm going to finish this walk." And I said, "I don't know how I'm going to feel when I get home." And she said, and I put this in the book, and I've said it so many times. She said, "When you were home, all those years living there, you were just a piece of that puzzle, and everything's so snug and happy. And when you get home, your piece is going to have shifted, and you're not going to fit back in that little hole that you used to. And you need to be ready for that." And she couldn't have said it more perfectly, because that's exactly how I felt. I still feel that way a little bit. But that first year back was tough. I felt like a tourist, even in my own hometown. All my friends, I love them. It has nothing to do with that. It's just, I experienced so much in my heart and in my head that, and just in life, that nobody can understand. And I can't expect them to, because how could I? No one's ever done that with me. And so to reminisce even is hard, because who do I reminisce with about anything on my walk? Wink, I guess, my dog. We can talk, I guess. So that coming back to normal life, it took me a long time just to unpack my house. I'm like, I don't know. I lived out of a cart for 8 months. What do I really need? So it was tough. And I dated a few people right when I got back, and that didn't go so well, just because I wasn't quite ready for togetherness yet. But you get back in a groove, and life is fairly normal now. It's a different normal now that I'm married with stepkids, and it's wonderful, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And that walk brought
How
me.
bad do you want to do the walk again?
Very. I actually have my next route planned.
Do you?
I would say there's a better than 50-50 chance that I'll do it again in 2026.
Wow.
Completely different route. My wife is on board. It saddens her a little bit. She's like, "I just got you and you're going to leave?" I'm like, "Oh no, it's not. Don't take it like that."
My wife would be so happy if I went away for 6 months.
I mean,
You want to come with me?
yes, Asif, do you want to walk?
She nodded her head. She
I was
nodded.
going to say,
I saw it.
Asif, if you'd like to walk across the country, I'll be happy to support you from afar. The problem, Thomas, is we have a piano in our house, and I like to play it, and Asif would rather I didn't.
Oh.
Oh, man. What?
Yeah, do I want to? 100%. Every day I miss that road. Despite how much I love my life right now, I miss the road. I can't help it. I drive down the road, and some people see a beautiful mountain, some people see the sea, and I'm like, wow, that's a really nice shoulder. I could walk that. And I drive around and I'm like, I could sleep behind that billboard. Like, that would be a good billboard to sleep behind.
See, you've got new eyes, and that's the thing, with resilience. A lot of people say, oh, resilience means I want to return to normal, and I just smile at them because it's like, it's never normal. You can't return to normal because something always has changed when you've gone through an episode or event or you've had a crisis or whatever. The normal looks different. So your eyes are completely different to how you see the world. And you have to have the patience to allow people to catch up with where you're at. Looking at the world through your eyes. So, you've really described for us this concept of resilience fits a context in which you find yourself. That is what resilience is.
Thank you. Can I give you one more quick road story? I was in Northern California, which California was the hardest part of my walk. No doubt. I came all the way down from Oregon. It was the worst part of my walk, my worst state to walk. And I was up near Red Bluff. I had just come through Mount Shasta, and it was really, really hot. It was August, and Red Bluff is one of the hottest places on earth in August, in California. And I took a wrong turn one day. I was going parallel to the 5, I thought. And my mom called me on my phone. I had a GPS tracker, by the way. That was a rule with my parents. They had to be able to know where I was. My mom called me and she said, I think you're going the wrong way. And I said, what? And I'm like, Mom, there's one road. I can't possibly be going the wrong way. So I pulled up my map. I'm like, sure enough, I had taken a turn somewhere that I didn't even know I turned. And I was pretty far out. And I was like, I was kind of stressed. So I worked my way back and I started to run out of water. And it was incredibly hot, and it was in the middle of nowhere. There were no houses or anything. And I was several miles from the next town and down to about a pint of water. I just planned poorly and got lost. So I came around this thing, and oh my God, there was a house. And not only was it a house, there was a car in the driveway with 2 20-ish-year-old guys standing next to the car. So I roll my cart up there, and I'm like, guys, can I please fill my water cans up? And they said no. And I said, no, I'm not asking for anything. You have a hose. Can I just fill my water up? And they were, get off our property. And I'm like, are you serious? And they wouldn't give me any water. And so I walked a little while longer, and I'm talking hot, over 100 degrees hot. And I finally sat down under this tree, and I had like this much water left in my bottle, and I was miles from my next town. I was on Google Maps. There were no other houses around. And I sincerely thought maybe I was going to die that day under that tree. And a few minutes, no, not a few minutes, maybe an hour later, I saw dirt coming up on the road. I'm like, oh, car's coming. Yeah, it was a dirt path. And sure enough, I waved this car down. And this guy in the car stopped, and he was on his way to a kid's soccer match. And in his back seat, he had a cooler of water bottles. And so he gives me a couple of water bottles, and I was like, wow, what are the odds of that? And so I took the water bottles, I made it to my hotel. I booked a motel that night, and I was still dehydrated. I sweated it out. I was fine. The next day, I was on that same road, and I'm coming into more farmland and ranch land. And I have coming towards me in the distance a guy on a bicycle. And as he gets closer and closer, we're on the same side of the road. As he gets closer and closer, I noticed he had this giant bag around his neck, which was kind of odd. And it looked heavy, like it was holding him down, weighing him down. And as he gets closer, I noticed it was kind of waving like this. And so I immediately put my hands on my weapons, which I had a couple of knives on my cart for safety, no guns or anything like that. Just in case. I was alone, no wink. And as he's getting closer to me, and I'm getting more and more nervous, he reached into his bag with his right hand, and he pulled out a peach. And as he rode by, he held it out at arm's length, and I just took that peach, and he kept going. We never even made eye contact. And I sat there and I ate that peach, and I was like, wow, like there's humanity restored from the 2 assholes the day before who almost killed me. And this guy will never know how much that peach meant to me. I wish I could find him and tell him how important that was. And I'm like, okay, I can keep going. I got this. And I never
That's
forget.
great.
I actually get a little choked up a little bit every time I tell that story, because it was a little bit of, yeah.
It's magic. It's the power of interconnectivity. You know what I mean? Like that's really the story you just told, because we as humans are connected. It's basic humanity, and I can't believe the people said no, but the universe delivered, and because you kept going. So I think that what an incredible story to really reflect, the fact that even when what do they say? And I think about this a lot in resilience. I can't remember if it's a book or a saying, but they say that it's like usually if someone's on a journey in the desert, they may give up and die right as the oasis appears. Like you always feel just before the end, you feel like it's over, and you really felt that. And then the universe swooped in with some water and a peach and said, hey, good job. You kept going. And that's, to me, that is the power of resilience, because whatever it is that you believe that does that, I'm a God person. I believe it's God, but I think it's the universe, it's the energy, it's the infinite intelligence, whatever it is that drives us as people, that magic happens. That magic happens everywhere. And so to know that it happens on the side of the road in Northern California when it's that hot is really inspiring, Thomas. It really is. It gives me new faith.
Good.
And the importance of community, the importance of people helping each other out.
Amen.
Yeah. I mean, this guy just wanted me to eat a peach that he probably had just picked or something. I'm not sure, but it meant a lot. The funny thing is that as I walked, I did pin drops in Google Maps. So I'd remember houses I stayed at and things like that. And just this, like 3 days ago, we were up in Central California, and I was on my Google Maps and I was looking at all my little pin drop hearts, and I was touching them to remember where I was, and I touched one and it said asshole. I showed Julie and my friends. I'm like, oh look, I pin dropped that guy. I don't remember doing that, but I must have done it right there where I was. And like, oh, I'm going to come back for him.
I bet that guy's brutally murdered in the book.
Yeah, they're in there.
Yeah, did you murder him in the book?
Oh yeah. Oh my word.
I don't think there's a better segue than this to get into the rapid fire
Agreed
questions.
Dr. Kelly.
Oh man, that's a whole different sense of community, that one. Community, double-edged sword. Well, Thomas, tell us. We're really curious. This has been a really, really interesting conversation, and we like to end Resiliency the podcast with some rapid-fire questions so that people can get to know you a little bit better outside of the story they just told. So our question to you is, what's your favorite movie or TV show that makes you feel resilient?
That's a tough one for me, honestly. I sometimes think of if I see that somebody else has like maybe a super difficult life, or they're just a really horrible person, or maybe they're just ornery or something, that I'm like, oh, well, my life's pretty darn good compared to this. And it may sound dumb or whatever, but I always felt that way when I watched Seinfeld. Like I thought I loved them so much, but they were so pathetic that it always made me feel better about whatever I was doing in my life that time, because I was not as such a horrible person as they were. I don't know. Do people come up with more meaningful things than that?
No. It's all relative. Yeah. So you just.
I was going to say Fight Club, because that movie does something to me too, and I can't quite define it, but it does do something to me. But if I really think about that, Seinfeld always made me feel better about myself as a human being.
Is that comparative resilience? Is that a thing, Dr. Kelly?
Oh, it is. He's measuring. It's like he's got his resilience index,
Yep.
right? And he's up here and they're down there. So that's good.
I don't know if that's resilience or not.
Sure it is. Sure it is. Well, what about your favorite song that makes you feel resilient?
Well, I started my walk every day I had a playlist that my son made for me. And every morning I hit that playlist, and there were 3 songs on it every morning. And they were Sweet Disposition by the Temper Trap, My Silver Lining by First Aid Kit, and oddly enough, Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue. And those 3 songs got me going every day. And it's funny because if Wink is with me, like in the car or wherever, and I start Sweet Disposition, which is the first song on my playlist, he knows. He for 4 months, he heard that song every morning, which meant 20 miles. And so it triggers him.
Oh, that's
I can make it happen like that. Walk in the room, put that song on.
So he just runs back into the house after hearing that song?
I'm out.
Yeah, because he's not
Is
walking
that
anymore.
playlist somewhere?
He's not
Is that
walking
playlist somewhere?
I still have it on, so I still listen to it. It's funny if you listen. If
Do you have it up somewhere? Is it on Spotify? Can we listen to it?
Sure. I will share it with you. My top
Awesome.
songs of 2019 are my walk. Basically, it's all I listen to, and those are up
Yeah.
there.
Nice.
That's a good question. I like that one.
What's the last thing that made you laugh out loud?
Honestly, my wife makes me laugh every day. She is so funny about things, and we laugh every day. She has these silly little things she does that maybe they're a little bit intimate faces or whatever that are only between us. But when she does them, I crack up because I know what it means to us. And also she does it at just the most appropriate times. And she also has them on video, like little memes she's created or whatever. And so if she knows I'm having a rough time, she'll just shoot that over to me, and it makes me laugh. And so absolutely, she's the last person that made me laugh. And to really joyfully smile was when I found out that my son was safe in the hurricanes. He's in Asheville, and so he is safe there and doing well.
Good.
I wasn't allowed.
Very
That
good.
was a big smile.
Yeah, huge relief.
Yeah. What's a question that you would like to leave a future guest?
I was supposed to think of one of those, wasn't I?
Off the top of your head is even better.
Yep.
What? Okay.
I'm failing.
What question would you ask?
Give me a trigger.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a trigger. What is the?
Thank you.
Okay, you're someone who's walked across the world. You've owned businesses. You've done all of these things, and you have a son you love. You listen to his playlist every day. What is a question that you would want him to ask himself every day?
Well, boy, in the matter of this, what would I want Holden to ask himself every day? If what he is doing right now in life, as successful as he's become in doing what he's doing, if it is truly feeding his soul, and in his business and his relationship, that's something always a parent always wonders: is what you're doing feeding your soul? And if not, can you do something different?
Spoken like,
Brilliant.
yeah, so brilliant, and spoken like a true chef and caring parent. And actually leads beautifully into our last question for you. So we have a question that was left by a past guest, and it feeds right into feeding your soul, because the question is, tell us in your life, what has been your most nourishing moment?
I mean, I would have to say the birth of my son. I remember how that felt and what it did for me as a man and as a human. I think because I never really thought I wanted a kid before he came around. And that changed me and made me a better person. So I would have to say that was my most nourishing moment, was when he was born. I know that probably is cliche, but it is true.
Well, your cliche has made me tear up, so that's good. No, it's so tender and so sweet and just so who you are, Thomas. And I've known you for a while, and I know Dr. Kelly's just getting to know you, and our listeners are going to know you and love you through this. But you have such a connection to life, and such a cool way of approaching things. And but you said earlier, my friend said maybe it was a midlife crisis. I'm 50. I was turning 50 and everything was changing. And I have a really strong feeling about that. I absolutely believe that as a nation, as a society, as a world, we should rebrand that to our midlife growth spurt. Because I really think that you growth spurted, and through that, you took all the pieces of your heart, your son Holden, your businesses, even those partnerships that were ending, you still hold them in your heart. You speak of them with that respect. And so I think that it's just been an honor for you to tell us how you wove all of that together and how resilience has been that through line for you. So I want to just say thank you and ask if there's anything else that we haven't asked that you would want to make sure that the listeners of Resiliency, the podcast, should know.
Well, since I failed somewhat on the providing a question quickly off the top of my head, came in a minute, I will give some advice.
Please.
Mm-hmm. I accomplished something that I never thought I could. I didn't even know that I could when I started it. And I will tell you that I bet 90% of the people that watched me take those first steps did not think I was going to finish. And so I would say that if there is something that you want to do in life, big or small, walk across the country or figure out how to make pizza dough, you can do it. Like, if it's here, you can do it physically. If your body can hold up to it, I do believe that anything is possible if you're physically able. And because the emotional part, I think you can get past. For most situations. I don't know that for 100%, but I think that in most situations you can. So do it. Or do a part of it, or do something.
Wise words,
Well said.
Extremely well said. Thomas, thank you again for being a guest on Resiliency, the podcast. Please tell our listeners, where can they find the great Thomas Curran, and where can they buy your book?
Instagram, at author Thomas Curran. You can find the book, which has 4.8 stars, by the way, on Amazon.
Woo, woo.
On Amazon. And I am just going to start doing an audiobook version of it. Never done it. People are asking. It'll be there Sunday.
Well, you have the right mic for it, so I'm excited to hear that. And guys, just saying once more that book is called Death, Discovery, and Carne Asada by Thomas Curran. Please find him. And then, Thomas, tell us if we want to eat any good food. Is there anywhere we should go in Irvine?
Oh, well, I mean, Costa Mesa is kind of where I hailed forever. And, I'm one of the old restaurant guys, so I love Havana and Memphis and Eat Chow, and Oak and Cole's one of my faves. So, but I live in LA now, so I'm experiencing all of LA.
It'll be interesting. So once you do your next walk, which you have teased first here on Resiliency, the podcast, we will bring you back, and maybe you'll be the most interesting man in Los Angeles by then. So we'll see how that turns out. In the meantime,
to call Greer after this.
In the meantime, to all of our listeners, we want to say thank you. Thank you so much for listening, for being on this journey with us. Community is very important to us. Please follow us, like us. You can find us at resiliencythepodcast.com or on any of the places that you listen to podcasts. You can find me online at Jenn Quader on all of the social medias, or at jennquader.com, or at my company, thesmartagency.com. Our illustrious and wonderful host, Dr. Kelly Culver, you can find her at theculvergroup.ca. That is Resilience.ca for Canada. And you can also find her at Dr. Kelly Culver on LinkedIn and Instagram. For all of the coolest food trends, you'd think I was going to plug our guest, but I'm not. It's our producer, Asif Quader. You can find him at Asif Quader, ASEF Quader, on Instagram and Facebook and all the socials. And there's a lot of wine involved, folks. And again, for all of us at Resiliency, the podcast, we thank you. This episode has been a beautiful one about enjoying life and about really being resilient through it. We wish you that in every part of your lives, and we look forward to seeing you back here next week for another story of resilient people. Until then, be well and take good care.